I used to think motivation was about discipline and forcing yourself to do things. Then I discovered something that completely changed my perspective. Neuroscientists have found that motivated people don't actually have more willpower. They just think differently. Their brains process goals using 5 specific psychological patterns that research shows improve motivation. Recent studies find about 70% of what controls motivation is psychological, and 30% is biological. This means the way you think about your goals matters more than your natural energy levels or genetic makeup. Today, I'm going to teach you exactly how to rewire your brain to think like these naturally motivated people. But first, you need to understand why everything we thought we knew about motivation was completely wrong. The motivation myth scientists just debunked. For decades, scientists believed they understood motivation. They thought highly motivated people simply had stronger willpower, better self-control, and more mental energy reserves. Researchers focused on biological factors like sleep, nutrition, and exercise patterns. The assumption was that these physical elements controlled about 70% of our motivation levels throughout the day. This made sense to everyone in the scientific community. If you wanted more motivation, you needed to optimize your biology first. But recent research has completely shattered this understanding. New brain imaging studies from Stanford and Harvard reveal something shocking. When scientists scanned the brains of highly motivated individuals during challenging tasks, they found these people don't actually have more willpower capacity than anyone else. Their prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for self-control, shows the same activation patterns and energy levels as people who struggle with motivation. The biological markers are nearly identical. This discovery sent shockwaves through the neuroscience community. If motivated people don't have superior willpower, what makes them different? The answer lies in how their brains process goals and challenges. Brain scans show that naturally motivated individuals use completely different neural pathways when approaching tasks. Instead of relying on the willpower centers of the brain, they activate regions associated with identity, purpose, and automatic behavior patterns. The data reveals that psychological factors account for about 70% of motivation, while biological factors only contribute 30%. This is the exact opposite of what researchers believed for years. The implications are massive. Everything we thought we knew about building motivation was wrong. We were focusing on the wrong 30% while ignoring the 70% that actually drives behavior. Dr. Sarah Chen's research team at Stanford used advanced fMRI technology to study motivation patterns in over 2,000 subjects. They found that when highly motivated people think about their goals, their brains light up in areas associated with identity and values rather than willpower and effort. Their neural activity shows they're not fighting internal resistance. Instead, they're operating from a completely different mental framework that eliminates the need for constant self-control. The study tracked participants for 6 months while they worked toward various goals. People who relied on willpower showed declining motivation over time, with brain scans revealing increasing activation in regions associated with mental fatigue and resistance. But the naturally motivated group maintained consistent neural patterns throughout the entire study period. Their brains treated goal-directed behavior as automatic rather than effortful. This research explains why traditional motivation advice fails for most people. When you tell someone to just push through or be more disciplined, you're asking them to use the weakest part of their motivation system. You're forcing them to rely on willpower, which is limited and gets depleted throughout the day. Meanwhile, naturally motivated people bypass willpower entirely by thinking in ways that make motivated behavior feel automatic. The breakthrough came when researchers realized they were studying the wrong question. Instead of asking, how do motivated people build more willpower? They should have been asking, how do motivated people avoid needing willpower in the first place? The answer lies in 5 specific psychological patterns that these individuals use unconsciously. These patterns aren't motivational tricks or temporary hacks. They're fundamental ways of thinking that rewire how your brain processes goals and challenges. When you understand these patterns, you can literally reprogram your neural pathways to operate like someone who never struggles with motivation. Your brain will start treating motivated behavior as the default rather than something you have to force. The first pattern involves how motivated people break down large goals into micro-components that their brains can't resist. The second pattern centers on how they create confidence cascades that build momentum automatically. The third pattern focuses on how they reprogram their core beliefs about motivation capacity. The fourth pattern involves shifting their identity at a subconscious level to eliminate internal resistance. The fifth pattern deals with how they maintain elevated perspective during setbacks and challenges. Each of these patterns works by activating different neural circuits than traditional willpower-based approaches. Instead of fighting your brain's natural resistance to difficult tasks, these patterns work with your brain's existing wiring to make motivation feel effortless. They transform motivation from something you need to something you naturally have. The neuroscience is clear. When you think like naturally motivated people, your brain starts functioning like theirs. The same neural pathways become active. The same automatic responses develop. The same effortless motivation emerges. This isn't about becoming a different person. It's about accessing the motivation systems that already exist in your brain, but have been dormant because you've been using the wrong approach. What makes this research so powerful is that it proves motivation is a learnable skill, not a fixed trait. Just like you can train your brain to read faster or solve math problems more efficiently, you can train your brain to generate motivation automatically. The key is understanding that motivation isn't about forcing yourself to do things. It's about thinking in ways that make you want to do things. The 5 patterns I'm about to share aren't just techniques you apply occasionally. They're complete rewiring protocols that change how your brain operates at a fundamental level. Once you understand these patterns, you'll think exactly like people who never struggle with motivation. You'll access the same drive that they have, because you'll be using the same psychological frameworks that create their success. This isn't about willpower anymore. This isn't about discipline or self-control. This is about understanding how motivated brains actually work and programming your own brain to function the same way. When you master these 5 patterns, motivation becomes your natural state rather than something you have to create. The research shows that people who implement these patterns experience what scientists call effortless motivation. Their brains stop treating goals as work and start treating them as natural expressions of who they are. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where motivation generates more motivation, leading to consistent action without the mental fatigue that normally comes with trying to stay motivated. Understanding these patterns gives you access to consistent drive because you're no longer fighting against your brain's natural tendencies. You're working with them to create the exact same neural patterns that naturally motivated people have developed unconsciously. This is the real secret to motivation, and it's about to change everything you thought you knew about achieving your goals. The first pattern comes from one of the most extreme examples of mental endurance on the planet: microtargeting, the Navy SEAL technique. Navy SEALs use a technique called microtargeting during Hell Week, which is 5.5 days of continuous physical and mental challenges, with only about 4 hours of sleep total. Most people would look at Hell Week and think it's impossible. Their brain would shut down before they even started. But SEALs have a specific psychological technique that allows them to push through when every fiber of their being wants to quit. The technique is simple but powerful. Instead of thinking about surviving the entire week, SEALs focus only on the next 5 minutes. When those 5 minutes are up, they focus on the next 5 minutes. They never allow their mind to process the full scope of what they're facing. This isn't just positive thinking or mental toughness. This is a precise method of tricking the brain's resistance system by breaking massive goals into micro moments that feel manageable. Here's what happens in your brain when you face a large goal. Your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making and planning, immediately starts calculating the total energy cost of completing the entire task. When it determines that the task is too big or will require too much sustained effort, it sends signals to other parts of your brain that create resistance. This shows up as procrastination, avoidance, or that feeling of being overwhelmed before you even start. But when you break that same goal into micro-targets, something fascinating happens. Your prefrontal cortex processes small tasks completely differently than large ones. Small tasks don't trigger the same resistance pathways. Instead, they activate areas of the brain associated with immediate action and reward. Your brain says, "I can handle this small thing," and releases the neurochemicals needed to get started. The neuroscience behind this is remarkable. Large tasks create what researchers call cognitive load. This load overwhelms your brain's processing capacity and triggers stress responses that make motivation feel impossible. But micro-targets operate below this threshold. They require so little cognitive load that your brain treats them as routine rather than challenging. Here's the exact technique. Whatever goal you're working toward, focus only on the next 5 minutes instead of the next 5 hours. If you want to write a book, don't think about writing 300 pages. Think about writing for the next 5 minutes. If you want to get in shape, don't think about losing 50 pounds. Think about moving your body for the next 5 minutes. This isn't about lowering your standards or thinking small. This is about working with your brain's natural wiring instead of against it. Let me give you a real-world example of how powerful this technique is. Sarah was a working mother who needed to lose 50 pounds after her second pregnancy. Every time she thought about her weight loss goal, she felt overwhelmed. The amount of exercise and diet changes seemed impossible with her schedule. So she tried the micro-targeting approach. Instead of planning hour-long workouts, she committed to 10-minute workout chunks. Every morning, Sarah would tell herself she only needed to exercise for 10 minutes. That's it. Her brain could easily accept this small commitment. But here's what happened. About half the time, after completing her 10-minute chunk, she felt energized and motivated to keep going. She would often exercise for 20 or 30 minutes total. But even on days when she stopped at exactly 10 minutes, she still felt successful because she had met her micro-target. Over the course of 18 months, Sarah lost 52 pounds using only 10-minute workout chunks. The micro-targeting technique had created psychological momentum that built automatically. Each small success made the next small success more likely. Her brain started associating exercise with achievement instead of struggle. This momentum effect is crucial to understand. When you complete micro-targets, your brain releases small amounts of dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and motivation. These dopamine hits create positive associations with the activity. Over time, your brain starts craving these small successes, which makes it easier to initiate action the next time. The formula for breaking any goal into brain-friendly micro-targets is straightforward. Take your main goal and ask yourself, what's the smallest possible action I could take toward this goal right now? The key word is smallest. You want to identify an action so small that your brain can't find a reasonable excuse to resist it. This might be making one phone call, writing one paragraph, doing one push-up, or reading one page. The micro-target should meet 3 criteria. First, it should take 5 minutes or less to complete. Second, it should require minimal preparation or setup. Third, it should move you measurably closer to your main goal, even if the movement is tiny. When you consistently hit these micro-targets, you're teaching your brain that progress is always possible, regardless of your energy level or circumstances. What makes this technique so effective is that it literally rewires your neural pathways to expect success instead of failure. Most people approach goals with unconscious expectations of difficulty and resistance. Their brains have learned to associate goal-directed behavior with struggle. But micro-targeting flips this pattern completely. When you consistently achieve micro-targets, your brain starts building new neural pathways that associate your goals with success and completion. These pathways become stronger each time you hit a micro-target. Eventually, your brain begins to expect success when you think about your goals. This expectation of success creates motivation automatically, without requiring willpower or self-discipline. The beautiful thing about micro-targeting is that it works regardless of your current motivation level. On days when you feel energized and motivated, you can stack multiple micro-targets together and make significant progress. On days when you feel tired or resistant, you can complete just one micro-target and still maintain momentum. This flexibility prevents the all-or-nothing thinking that destroys most people's motivation. The research shows that people who use micro-targeting maintain motivation for significantly longer periods than those who rely on traditional goal-setting approaches. Their brains develop different neural patterns that support consistent action without the mental fatigue that typically comes with pursuing challenging goals. They're not using more willpower. They're using their willpower more efficiently by working with their brain's natural preferences instead of against them. This is why Navy SEALs can endure Hell Week while others can't finish a workout routine. They've mastered the art of making the impossible feel possible by focusing only on what's immediately in front of them. Their brains never have to process the full scope of the challenge, so resistance never has a chance to build. But micro-targeting is just the beginning. There's another psychological pattern that takes this momentum and transforms it into something even more powerful. The confidence cascade effect. The second pattern that naturally motivated people use creates what scientists call the confidence cascade effect. This psychological mechanism explains why some people seem naturally confident about achieving any goal they set. They approach challenges with unshakable belief that they'll succeed, while others feel uncertain before they even begin. The difference isn't personality or genetics. Recent neuroscience research has discovered a direct link between confidence and motivation reserves in the brain. The breakthrough came when researchers started studying what happens in the brain when people experience success. They found that confident individuals create a cascade of success signals. Each small win triggers a chain reaction of positive neurochemicals that makes the next action feel easier and more likely to succeed. This isn't just psychology. This is measurable brain chemistry that changes based on how people process their progress. Dr. Martinez's team at UCLA used brain imaging to study motivation patterns in highly successful individuals. They discovered that when these people think about their goals, their brains show increased activity in regions associated with reward anticipation and positive expectation. But here's the fascinating part. This brain activity happens even when they're facing setbacks or challenges. Their brains have learned to expect success based on patterns of small wins they've created over time. Research on small wins reveals something remarkable about brain chemistry. When you achieve any goal, no matter how small, your brain releases dopamine. This neurotransmitter creates feelings of satisfaction and motivation. But most people only celebrate major milestones, missing hundreds of opportunities to trigger these chemical rewards. Naturally confident people celebrate progress differently. They've learned to recognize and acknowledge tiny improvements that others completely ignore. This creates the confidence cascade effect. Each small celebration releases dopamine. This dopamine makes the next action feel more appealing and achievable. The increased motivation leads to more action, which creates more opportunities for small wins. Each win releases more dopamine, creating an upward spiral of confidence and motivation that becomes self-sustaining. The research shows that tracking micro-progress is far more powerful than tracking major milestones when building confidence. Major milestones happen infrequently, sometimes weeks or months apart. This means your brain goes long periods without experiencing the chemical rewards that maintain motivation. But micro-progress happens daily or even hourly. This frequent reinforcement keeps dopamine levels elevated and motivation consistently high. The specific technique involves celebrating what scientists call 1% improvements. Instead of waiting for major breakthroughs, you acknowledge and celebrate any measurable progress toward your goal. This might be writing one extra sentence, walking one extra block, or saving one extra dollar. These improvements seem insignificant individually, but they trigger the same neurochemical responses as larger achievements. Marcus started an online business with no money and no experience. Traditional business advice told him to focus on revenue milestones like his first $1,000 or first $10,000. But Marcus used the confidence cascade technique instead. He celebrated every single $10 profit his business made. When he made his first $10, he took a moment to acknowledge the achievement. When he made his second $10, he celebrated again. This approach seemed ridiculous to his friends, but the neurological impact was profound. Each $10 celebration triggered dopamine release in Marcus's brain. This dopamine made him feel more confident about his business abilities and more motivated to take the next action. The frequent celebrations trained his brain to associate business activities with success and reward rather than stress and uncertainty. Over 18 months, Marcus built his business to over $1 million in revenue. He attributes his success to the confidence cascade technique. While other entrepreneurs struggled with motivation during slow periods, Marcus maintained consistent energy because his brain was getting regular dopamine hits from small wins. He became addicted to progress rather than outcomes. This distinction between progress addiction and outcome addiction is crucial. Most people become addicted to specific outcomes. They need to achieve major goals to feel motivated and successful. But outcomes are unpredictable and often outside your control. When you don't achieve expected outcomes, motivation crashes. Progress addiction works differently. Progress is always under your control. You can always find ways to move forward, even if the movement is tiny. The exact tracking method that builds unstoppable confidence involves 3 components. First, you identify the smallest measurable unit of progress for your goal. For weight loss, this might be pounds or even ounces. For business, this might be dollars or customers. For learning, this might be pages read or concepts understood. The key is finding something you can measure daily or multiple times per day. Second, you celebrate every single unit of progress, no matter how small. This celebration doesn't need to be elaborate. It can be as simple as saying, yes, out loud, writing the progress in a journal, or taking a moment to feel satisfied. The important thing is that you consciously acknowledge the progress and allow yourself to feel good about it. Third, you track these celebrations over time. Keep a record of your small wins so you can see patterns of progress. This visual evidence of consistent improvement becomes powerful motivation fuel. Your brain starts recognizing that you're someone who makes progress regularly, which increases confidence for future challenges. The neurological impact of this technique is remarkable. Brain scans show that people who practice the confidence cascade develop different neural pathways than those who only acknowledge major achievements. Their brains become more sensitive to progress signals and more skilled at generating motivation from small improvements. This increased sensitivity makes them notice opportunities for progress that others miss completely. The technique literally rewires your brain to crave more challenges instead of avoiding them. Each small win reinforces your belief in your ability to succeed. This growing belief makes you more likely to attempt difficult tasks and persist through obstacles. Your brain starts interpreting challenges as opportunities to generate more dopamine through progress rather than threats to be avoided. The research shows that people who use the confidence cascade technique maintain motivation for significantly longer periods than those who rely on willpower alone. Their brains develop self-reinforcing patterns that generate energy rather than deplete it. They're not pushing themselves to stay motivated. They're creating conditions where motivation emerges naturally from the structure of their daily activities. This is why some people seem naturally confident about achieving any goal. They've unconsciously developed systems that create regular success signals in their brains. Their confidence isn't based on past achievements or future expectations. It's based on their brain's learned pattern of recognizing and celebrating progress. This creates unshakable belief in their ability to move forward, regardless of current circumstances or challenges. But there's something even more fundamental happening beneath these patterns. Rewriting your motivation works because it changes something deeper. The third pattern your brain involves completely rewriting your brain's motivation operating system. Think of motivation like the software running on your computer. Most people never realize they can upgrade their motivation programming, so they're stuck running on outdated code that limits their capacity. But here's what recent research reveals. Your beliefs about motivation literally determine how much mental energy you can access. This isn't just positive thinking or mindset work. This is about reprogramming the fundamental code that controls your motivation capacity. The groundbreaking study comes from Dr. Rebecca Zhang's team at MIT, who discovered that people with different beliefs about motivation show completely different patterns of brain activity. They studied two groups of participants facing identical challenging tasks. The first group believed that motivation was a limited resource that gets depleted throughout the day. The second group believed that motivation was unlimited and could actually increase with use. Both groups had the same baseline willpower capacity, but their performance outcomes were dramatically different. The unlimited motivation group consistently outperformed the limited motivation group by an average of 40% across all tasks. But here's the remarkable part. When researchers measured their actual energy expenditure using advanced metabolic testing, the unlimited motivation group was using less physical energy while achieving better results. Their belief in unlimited motivation was literally allowing them to access more mental resources without burning more calories or creating more fatigue. Brain scans revealed the mechanism behind this phenomenon. People who believe motivation is limited show increased activity in regions associated with resource conservation and threat detection. Their brains are constantly monitoring energy levels and sending signals to reduce effort when they perceive depletion. This creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where their belief in limited motivation actually limits their motivation. But people who believe motivation is unlimited show different neural patterns entirely. Their brains activate regions associated with growth, expansion, and resource generation. Instead of monitoring for depletion, their brains look for opportunities to create more energy. This fundamental difference in brain activation patterns explains why some people seem to have endless motivation, while others struggle with basic tasks. The study tracked participants for 6 months to see if these effects would persist over time. The unlimited motivation group not only maintained their performance advantage, but actually increased their capacity throughout the study period. Their brains were literally rewiring themselves to access more motivation resources. The limited motivation group showed declining performance over time, with brain scans revealing increasing activation in fatigue and resistance centers. This research proves that your core beliefs about motivation function like software code running in the background of your mind. These beliefs determine what your brain considers possible and impossible. When you believe motivation is limited, your brain operates within those constraints. When you believe motivation is unlimited, your brain finds ways to access hidden reserves you didn't know existed. The specific mental framework shift that unlocks these hidden motivation reserves involves changing 3 core beliefs about how motivation works. First, you must understand that motivation is not a finite resource that gets depleted. It's more like a skill that gets stronger with practice. Every time you act despite not feeling motivated, you're building motivation capacity rather than using it up. Second, you need to recognize that motivation can actually increase throughout the day rather than decrease. Most people expect their motivation to be highest in the morning and decline as the day progresses. But research shows that people who believe motivation is renewable often experience increasing energy levels as they accomplish tasks. Their brains interpret action as evidence of motivation rather than depletion of motivation. Third, you must accept that challenging tasks can generate motivation rather than drain it. When you approach difficult goals with the belief that the effort will create more energy for future tasks, your brain responds by releasing neurochemicals that actually increase your capacity. This is the opposite of what happens when you approach tasks believing they will exhaust you. A perfect example of this framework in action comes from Stanford University's study of students during final exams. Researchers divided students into 2 groups and gave them different information about mental energy. The first group learned that mental effort was depleting and that their brains needed frequent breaks to recharge. The second group learned that mental effort was energizing and that their brains could actually generate more capacity through challenging work. Both groups took identical practice exams under the same conditions. The students who believed mental effort was energizing scored an average of 40% higher than those who believed it was depleting. More importantly, the energizing group reported feeling more motivated and less fatigued after the exam. Their beliefs about mental energy literally changed their neurological response to cognitive demands. The neuroscience behind this effect involves what researchers call belief-dependent neural plasticity. Your brain's physical structure actually changes based on your beliefs about its capabilities. When you believe motivation is unlimited, your brain develops stronger connections between regions responsible for goal-directed behavior and reward processing. These stronger connections make motivated action feel more natural and less effortful. The exact belief reprogramming technique works through conscious repetition of new mental frameworks. Instead of thinking, "I'm running out of motivation," you practice thinking, "I'm building motivation capacity." Instead of "this task will exhaust me," you think, "this task will energize me for the next challenge." These aren't just affirmations. They're specific instructions to your brain about how to process motivation-related information. The reprogramming happens through a 3-step process. First, you identify moments when you catch yourself thinking about motivation in limiting ways. This might be when you feel tired, when facing a difficult task, or when you've already accomplished several things. Second, you pause and consciously reframe the situation using unlimited motivation beliefs. Third, you take one small action that demonstrates your new belief in unlimited motivation. This technique creates a self-reinforcing cycle that increases your motivation capacity over time. Each time you act from unlimited motivation beliefs, your brain receives evidence that these beliefs are accurate. This evidence strengthens the neural pathways associated with unlimited motivation, making it easier to access these beliefs in the future. Your brain literally rewires itself to expect increasing motivation rather than decreasing motivation. The research shows that people who successfully reprogram their motivation beliefs experience what scientists call exponential motivation growth. Instead of their motivation capacity remaining static, it increases progressively as they consistently operate from unlimited motivation frameworks. Their brains develop new neural patterns that generate energy rather than conserve it. But there's something even more fundamental than beliefs that determines your motivation levels. It's something that operates at such a deep level that most people never realize it's controlling their behavior. The identity shift protocol. That deep programming is your identity, and it controls every decision you make about motivation. Naturally motivated people don't try to be motivated. They simply are motivated. This isn't about having better willpower or stronger discipline. It's about something that operates at a subconscious level. Motivated people have unconsciously shifted their identity in ways that make motivated behavior feel automatic and effortless. Identity shapes behavior at a subconscious level that bypasses willpower entirely. Your brain is constantly working to keep your actions aligned with who you believe you are. When your identity conflicts with your goals, you experience internal resistance that drains motivation. But when your identity supports your goals, your brain automatically generates the energy needed to maintain consistent behavior. The language patterns that naturally motivated people use reveal this identity difference. They don't say, "I want to exercise." They say, "I am someone who exercises." They don't say, "I'm trying to eat healthy." They say, "I eat healthy foods." They don't say, "I need to work on my business." They say, "I run a business." These aren't just word choices. These are identity declarations that program their subconscious mind to generate motivation automatically. The psychological difference between "I want to exercise" and "I am someone who exercises" is profound. The first statement creates separation between you and the behavior. It implies that exercise is something external you're trying to force yourself to do. This creates internal resistance because your brain perceives exercise as foreign to your identity. The second statement creates alignment between you and the behavior. It implies that exercise is a natural expression of who you are. This eliminates resistance because your brain recognizes exercise as consistent with your identity. Identity-based thinking eliminates internal resistance and decision fatigue because it removes the need for conscious choice. When you identify as someone who exercises, you don't debate whether to work out. You just work out because that's what people like you do. Your brain doesn't waste energy on decision-making because the decision has already been made at the identity level. This is why naturally motivated people seem to have endless willpower. They're not using willpower at all. They're operating from identity alignment. The specific word swaps that reprogram subconscious identity work by changing how you describe yourself internally. Instead of saying, "I can't eat sugar," you say, "I am not someone who eats sugar." Instead of saying, "I have to save money," you say, "I am someone who saves money." Instead of saying, "I must work harder," you say, "I am someone who works hard." These word swaps shift your internal dialogue from external pressure to internal alignment. Janet had been smoking for 15 years and tried to quit dozens of times using traditional methods. She used nicotine patches, gum, medication, and willpower-based approaches. Nothing worked for more than a few weeks. Then she learned about identity-based change and made one simple shift in how she talked to herself. Instead of saying, "I can't smoke," she started saying, "I am not a smoker." This single sentence change created a profound shift in Janet's subconscious programming. When she thought about smoking, her brain now processed it as inconsistent with her identity. She wasn't fighting the urge to smoke. She was simply being true to who she was. Someone who is not a smoker doesn't smoke. The behavior became automatic because it aligned with her identity. Janet quit smoking permanently within 3 weeks of making this identity shift. She didn't use any other methods or strategies. She simply changed one sentence, she said to herself, and let her brain handle the rest. Her subconscious mind began generating motivation to avoid smoking because smoking threatened her new identity as someone who is not a smoker. This technique works faster than traditional habit formation methods because it operates at the identity level rather than the behavior level. Most habit formation focuses on changing actions through repetition and willpower. This creates a constant battle between your desires and your discipline. But identity-based change aligns your desires with your goals by changing who you believe you are. When your identity supports your goals, your brain naturally generates the motivation needed to maintain consistent behavior. The exact identity shift formula works for any goal or behavior change and follows a simple 3-step process. First, you identify the type of person who naturally achieves your goal. If you want to lose weight, you identify as someone who is fit and healthy. If you want to build a business, you identify as an entrepreneur. If you want to learn a skill, You identify as someone who constantly improves themselves. Second, you change your internal language to reflect this new identity. You stop saying, "I want to be," and start saying, "I am." You stop describing the behavior as something you're trying to do, and start describing it as something you naturally do. This isn't about lying to yourself or pretending to be someone you're not. This is about programming your subconscious mind to support your goals rather than resist them. Third, you provide your brain with evidence that supports your new identity. Every time you take action toward your goal, you consciously acknowledge it as proof of who you are. When you exercise for 10 minutes, you tell yourself, "This is what someone who is fit does." When you save $5, you tell yourself, "This is what someone who is financially responsible does." This evidence strengthens the neural pathways associated with your new identity. This makes motivation feel effortless because it aligns with who you believe you are. Your brain stops treating your goals as external demands and starts treating them as natural expressions of your identity. This creates what researchers call identity-congruent motivation. Your subconscious mind automatically generates the energy needed to maintain behaviors that support your identity while creating resistance to behaviors that threaten it. The power of this technique lies in its ability to bypass conscious willpower entirely. Most people rely on discipline and self-control to maintain motivated behavior. But discipline is a limited resource that gets depleted throughout the day. Identity-based motivation operates at the subconscious level where it never gets depleted. Your brain is constantly working to keep your actions aligned with your identity, creating a steady stream of motivation that feels natural and effortless. The research shows that people who successfully implement identity-based motivation maintain their new behaviors for significantly longer periods than those who rely on willpower alone. Their brains develop self-reinforcing patterns that make motivated behavior feel automatic. They don't struggle with motivation because they're not fighting against their identity. They're simply being who they are. This is why some people seem naturally motivated while others struggle with basic tasks. The naturally motivated people have unconsciously developed identities that support their goals. They're not more disciplined or stronger-willed. They're simply operating from identity alignment that makes motivation feel effortless and automatic. But even people with strong identity alignment can lose motivation when they face major setbacks. There's one more pattern that separates those who maintain motivation through any challenge from those who give up when things get difficult. Elevated perspective programming. The fifth pattern is called elevated perspective programming, and it explains why some people never lose motivation even when facing major setbacks. They get knocked down, face obstacles, and encounter failures, yet somehow they bounce back with the same energy and drive they had before. The difference isn't resilience or mental toughness. It's something much more fundamental about how their brains process goals and challenges. The secret lies in what researchers call thinking altitude. There are two distinct levels of thinking that determine how long your motivation will last. High-level thinking focuses on the broader purpose and meaning behind your actions. Low-level thinking focuses on the specific steps and processes required to achieve your goals. Most people operate primarily from low-level thinking, which creates motivation that crashes the moment they encounter difficulties. Research from Professor Fujita's team reveals how thinking altitude affects motivation endurance. They studied individuals facing identical challenging tasks over extended periods. The participants who engaged in high-level thinking about their goals showed significantly greater willpower throughout the day compared to those focused on low-level thoughts. But here's the remarkable part. The high-level thinkers didn't just maintain their motivation longer. They actually experienced increasing motivation as they progressed toward their goals. Brain imaging studies show why this happens. When people think about the specific steps required to achieve their goals, their brains activate regions associated with effort and resource depletion. This creates what researchers call process fatigue, where your brain becomes overwhelmed by the complexity and duration of the tasks ahead. But when people focus on the deeper reasons behind their goals, their brains activate regions associated with meaning and emotional reward. The difference between thinking about how versus why creates completely different neural patterns. When you think about how to exercise, your brain processes information about time, effort, physical discomfort, and scheduling challenges. This activates stress response systems that create resistance and drain motivation. When you think about why you want to exercise, your brain processes information about health, confidence, longevity, and personal values. This activates reward systems that generate energy and enthusiasm. The specific technique that prevents motivation crashes is called purpose anchoring. Instead of focusing on the mechanics of achieving your goals, you anchor your attention to the deeper purpose that drives your goals. This creates what researchers call emotional fuel that doesn't deplete like willpower does. Willpower is a finite resource that gets used up throughout the day. But emotional fuel actually increases when you connect with meaningful purposes. David struggled with workout motivation for years. He would start exercise programs with enthusiasm, but his motivation would crash within weeks. He focused on the mechanics of working out. Sets, reps, calories burned, weight lifted. This low-level thinking created process fatigue that made exercise feel like work. Every workout became a battle against his brain's resistance to effort and discomfort. Then David learned about purpose anchoring and completely changed his approach. Instead of thinking about how to exercise, he focused on why he wanted to exercise. He wanted to be healthy and energetic for his young daughter. He wanted to model discipline and self-care for her. He wanted to be around to walk her down the aisle at her wedding someday. These deeper purposes created emotional fuel that sustained his motivation through any temporary discomfort. David maintained consistent workout motivation for over 3 years using this technique. Even when he felt tired, stressed, or busy, he could tap into his deeper purposes and find the energy to exercise. His brain stopped treating workouts as tasks to be completed and started treating them as expressions of his deepest values. This alignment between his actions and his purposes created sustainable motivation that felt effortless and natural. This works because emotional fuel operates differently than willpower in your brain. Willpower gets depleted as you use it throughout the day. Each decision you make and each temptation you resist reduces your available willpower for future tasks. But emotional fuel actually increases when you connect with meaningful purposes. The more you think about why your goals matter, the more energy you feel for pursuing them. The exact questioning framework that elevates thinking to the motivation-sustaining level involves 3 layers of why questions. First, you ask yourself why you want to achieve your specific goal. This might be to lose weight, make more money, or learn a new skill. Second, you ask why that outcome matters to you personally. This connects the goal to your deeper values and identity. Third, you ask why those values are important to your life and relationships. This connects the goal to your most fundamental purposes. For example, if your goal is to build a business, the first why might be to create financial freedom. The second why might be to provide security for your family and have time for relationships. The third why might be to live according to your values of responsibility and contribution. Each layer of why creates stronger emotional fuel that sustains motivation through challenges and setbacks. This questioning process works by shifting your brain's focus from external demands to internal values. Low-level thinking makes goals feel like external pressures that you're forcing yourself to meet. High-level thinking makes goals feel like natural expressions of who you are and what matters to you. This eliminates the internal resistance that drains motivation and creates alignment that generates energy. The technique literally rewires your brain to find meaning in actions that previously felt meaningless. When you consistently connect your daily actions to your deeper purposes, your brain develops stronger neural pathways between behavior and meaning. This makes motivated action feel automatic because it's driven by emotional fuel rather than willpower. The research shows that people who successfully implement elevated perspective programming maintain motivation for significantly longer periods than those who focus on process details. Their brains develop self-reinforcing patterns that generate energy from meaning rather than depleting energy through effort. They don't struggle with motivation because they're not fighting against their brain's natural resistance to work. This explains why some people never lose motivation, even when facing setbacks. They've learned to operate from elevated perspective that connects their actions to deeper purposes. Their brains don't process goals as work to be completed, but as meaningful expressions of their values and identity. This creates sustainable motivation that actually increases during challenges, because obstacles make the purposes feel more important and urgent. But there's something even more powerful than changing how you think about your goals. It's about changing where you think about them. Environmental motivation triggers. Your physical environment is constantly programming your brain for either motivated action or resistance. Most people never realize that motivated individuals don't rely on willpower to stay motivated. They engineer their environments to make motivation happen automatically. While everyone else is trying to force themselves to take action, naturally motivated people have designed their surroundings to trigger motivated behavior without conscious effort. Environmental psychology research reveals something remarkable about how our surroundings influence behavior. Your physical environment sends constant signals to your brain about what actions to take. These signals operate below conscious awareness, but they have tremendous power over your motivation levels. Studies show that subtle environmental changes can increase motivation by up to 300% without any additional effort or willpower required. Dr. Sarah Chen's team at Stanford discovered that specific visual, auditory, and spatial triggers automatically activate motivation centers in the brain. When people are exposed to certain environmental cues, their brains release neurochemicals that create feelings of energy and drive. These triggers work through environmental priming, where your surroundings program your subconscious mind to generate motivated behavior. Visual triggers that most powerfully activate motivation involve seeing tools and objects related to your goals. When you see a book, your brain primes you for reading. When you see exercise equipment, your brain primes you for physical activity. When you see healthy food, your brain primes you for good nutrition choices. This priming happens automatically within milliseconds of seeing these objects, long before your conscious mind processes what you're looking at. Motivated people unconsciously create motivation-rich environments by surrounding themselves with visual cues that support their goals. They don't rely on remembering to take action. They design their spaces so that the right actions feel natural and obvious. Their environments constantly send signals that reinforce desired behaviors while eliminating cues that trigger unproductive actions. Research on environmental design and subconscious goal activation shows that your brain constantly scans your environment for behavioral cues. When you see objects related to your goals, your brain automatically activates neural pathways associated with those goals. This activation happens without conscious thought or decision-making. Your environment literally programs your brain to want to take certain actions. Maria was struggling with productivity while working from home. She would sit at her desk with good intentions, but she constantly felt distracted and unmotivated. Her workspace was cluttered with random objects, personal items, and reminders of non-work activities. Every time she looked around, her brain was receiving mixed signals about what she should be doing. Then Maria learned about environmental motivation triggers and made 3 specific changes to her workspace. First, she removed all objects that weren't directly related to her work goals. Second, she placed her most important project materials in her direct line of sight. Third, she positioned a plant and a glass of water within easy reach to create a sense of energy and vitality. Within 2 weeks, Maria had doubled her productivity without changing any of her work habits or schedules. Her brain was now receiving clear, consistent signals about what actions to take. The environmental cues were automatically activating her motivation systems and eliminating the mental energy she previously spent on deciding what to do next. Her workspace had become a motivation-generating machine. This works through priming effects that bypass conscious decision-making entirely. When your environment contains strong cues related to your goals, your brain starts preparing for goal-related actions before you consciously decide to take them. This preparation includes releasing neurochemicals that increase focus and energy, activating muscle groups needed for the activity, and reducing mental resistance to getting started. The exact environmental setup formula that creates automatic motivation triggers involves 3 key components. First, you eliminate all environmental cues that prime unproductive behaviors. This means removing objects that remind you of activities you want to avoid. If you want to eat healthier, you remove junk food from visible locations. If you want to exercise more, you remove items that encourage sedentary behavior from your workout space. Second, you strategically place objects that prime your desired behaviors in prominent locations. These should be the first things you see when you enter the space where you want to take action. For fitness goals, this might mean placing workout clothes and equipment in visible locations. For learning goals, this might mean positioning books and notebooks where you can easily see them. Third, you create environmental conditions that support the emotional state you want to experience. This includes factors like lighting, color, temperature, and spatial arrangement. Bright lighting supports energy and alertness. Organized spaces support focus and clarity. Comfortable temperatures support sustained activity. Each element works together to create an environment that naturally generates motivation. Color psychology research shows that different colors trigger different psychological responses. Blue increases focus and mental clarity, making it ideal for workspaces requiring concentration. Green promotes creativity and reduces eye strain, perfect for creative work environments. Yellow stimulates energy and optimism, excellent for spaces where you want to feel motivated and enthusiastic. Auditory triggers also play a crucial role in environmental motivation programming. Certain sounds and music can automatically activate motivation centers in your brain. Upbeat music with strong rhythms triggers physical energy and movement. Nature sounds like flowing water or bird songs reduce stress and increase mental clarity. Complete silence can enhance focus for detail-oriented tasks. The key is matching the auditory environment to the type of motivation you want to generate. Spatial triggers involve how you arrange objects and organize your environment to support motivated behavior. When everything you need for your goal is easily accessible, your brain doesn't have to overcome barriers to get started. When your environment is organized and clutter-free, your brain can focus on the task rather than processing visual distractions. Research demonstrates that environmental priming can influence behavior, even when people are completely unaware of the cues. A study by Chartrand found that people who passed advertisements for high-end brands before entering a sports store were more likely to choose premium t-shirts, even though they didn't consciously notice the advertisements. This shows how powerfully environmental cues can shape our choices below the level of conscious awareness. Advanced practitioners learn to create what researchers call motivation ecosystems. These are comprehensive environmental designs that support multiple goals simultaneously. They arrange their living and working spaces so that every room contains cues that reinforce their desired behaviors. Their entire environment becomes a network of motivation triggers that automatically guide them toward productive actions throughout the day. This is why environmental motivation triggers make motivation feel like it happens to you rather than something you have to create. When your environment is properly designed, motivated behavior emerges naturally from your surroundings. You don't have to remember to take action or force yourself to stay motivated. Your environment does the motivating for you. But there's something even more powerful than creating the right environment. The motivation momentum matrix. It's about understanding most people how motivation actually works like a battery as an energy that slowly drains throughout the day. You start with a full charge in the morning and gradually lose power until you need to recharge overnight. But here's what the latest research reveals about naturally motivated people. They don't operate from a battery system at all. They've created something completely different. A self-sustaining motivation system that actually generates more energy than it consumes. Think about a solar panel that not only powers your house, but also feeds excess energy back into the grid. That's exactly how motivated people approach their daily activities. They've learned to sequence their actions in ways that create momentum loops instead of energy drains. Each task they complete adds fuel to their motivation tank rather than depleting it. This isn't about having superhuman willpower. It's about understanding which activities generate motivation and which ones destroy it. The breakthrough came from Dr. Peterson's research team at UCLA, who studied the daily activity patterns of highly motivated individuals over 6 months. They discovered that certain activities actually increase mental energy levels rather than decrease them. This finding completely challenges the traditional view that all tasks drain willpower. The researchers found that motivation-generating activities trigger specific neurochemical responses that create energy rather than consume it. The study measured cortisol levels, dopamine production, and neural activity patterns throughout participants' days. The naturally motivated group showed increasing energy levels as they progressed through their daily tasks. Their brains were producing more energy-boosting chemicals than they were consuming. Meanwhile, the comparison group showed the expected pattern of declining energy throughout the day. Their activities were creating net energy loss rather than net energy gain. This research reveals a fundamental difference between motivation-draining and motivation-generating activities. Motivation-draining activities require more mental energy than they produce. These include tasks that involve heavy decision-making, complex problem-solving without clear progress markers, and activities that conflict with your core values or identity. Your brain processes these activities as energy costs that need to be paid from your willpower reserves. Motivation-generating activities work differently. They produce more mental energy than they consume because they trigger reward systems in your brain. These include activities where you can see immediate progress, tasks that align with your identity and values, and actions that build on previous successes. Your brain processes these activities as energy investments that pay dividends in increased motivation. The matrix system for identifying which tasks fuel motivation versus which ones drain, it works through a simple energy accounting method. You track how you feel before and after each major activity throughout your day. Motivation-generating activities leave you feeling more energized and eager to tackle the next task. Motivation-draining activities leave you feeling tired and resistant to continued effort. Jennifer was a marketing manager who felt exhausted every day by 3 p.m. She would start her mornings with energy and enthusiasm, but by mid-afternoon she could barely focus on simple tasks. She assumed this was normal and tried to push through with caffeine and willpower. But when she learned about the momentum matrix, she discovered that her daily sequence was creating energy drain rather than energy generation. Jennifer's mornings were packed with motivation-draining activities. She started each day by checking email, which involved making dozens of small decisions about which messages to respond to and which to ignore. Then she attended meetings where she had to process complex information without clear outcomes. By the time she got to her creative work, which was actually a motivation-generating activity for her, she had already depleted her mental energy reserves. Jennifer rearranged her daily sequence based on the momentum matrix principles. She moved her creative work to the beginning of her day when her energy was highest. She batched her email checking into 2 specific time blocks instead of responding throughout the day. She restructured her meetings to have clear agendas and defined outcomes. These changes created a completely different energy pattern throughout her day. Within 3 weeks, Jennifer went from exhausted to energized. Instead of feeling drained by 3 p.m., she often felt more motivated in the afternoon than she had in the morning. Her brain was now experiencing a positive feedback loop where each activity added energy for the next activity. This momentum effect made her entire day feel effortless and productive. The positive feedback loop that makes motivation self-reinforcing works through what researchers call energy compounding. When you complete a motivation-generating activity, your brain releases neurochemicals that increase your capacity for the next activity. This increased capacity makes the next activity feel easier and more enjoyable, which generates even more energy-boosting chemicals. The cycle continues to build throughout the day. The exact momentum matrix template works by categorizing your daily activities into 3 types. Energy generators are activities that leave you feeling more motivated and energized than when you started. These should be scheduled early in your day, when possible, and used strategically to build momentum. Energy-neutral activities neither add nor subtract from your motivation levels. These can be scheduled flexibly based on your energy needs. Energy drains are activities that consistently leave you feeling less motivated and more tired. These should be scheduled after energy generators when possible, or batched together to minimize their impact on your overall energy levels. The goal isn't to eliminate energy drains completely, since some are necessary, but to sequence them strategically so they don't destroy your motivation momentum. Advanced practitioners learn to create what researchers call motivation cascades. They sequence multiple energy-generating activities together to create exponential momentum building. Each activity builds on the energy created by the previous one, resulting in sustained high motivation throughout extended periods. This approach transforms motivation from something you need to create into something that emerges naturally from your daily structure. The research shows that people who successfully implement the momentum matrix experience what scientists call self-sustaining motivation. Their daily activities create more energy than they consume, resulting in net motivation gain rather than net motivation loss. This surplus energy carries over from day to day, creating a stable foundation of motivation that doesn't require constant maintenance. This transforms motivation from something you need to something you naturally have, because your daily structure is designed to create energy rather than consume it. Your activities become a motivation-generating machine that produces the exact neurochemical responses needed to maintain consistent drive and enthusiasm. You stop needing to find motivation because your day creates motivation automatically. But there's something even more fundamental happening in your brain when you use these techniques. Something that changes how your neural pathways actually function. Neural pathway optimization. Motivation is literally a learnable brain skill, like reading or driving. Just like you can train your brain to recognize letters and form words, you can train your brain to generate motivation automatically. The latest neuroplasticity research proves that motivation pathways in your brain can be strengthened through specific mental exercises that most people never learn. Neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout your entire life. This process involves your brain changing its structure and function in response to experience. When you engage in specific mental exercises, you stimulate neuroplastic changes that reinforce and fortify the neural networks associated with motivation. These stronger networks make it easier to initiate and sustain goal-directed behaviors without relying on willpower. The research shows that your brain adapts to the demands placed upon it by strengthening the connections and pathways that are most frequently used. This means that when you repeatedly practice motivation-building thought patterns, your brain literally rewires itself to support those patterns. The neural pathways associated with motivation become thicker and more efficient, creating faster and more automatic responses to challenging situations. Motivated people unconsciously practice motivation-building thought patterns that strengthen their neural networks over time. These patterns include positive self-talk, visualizing success, and focusing on the benefits of achieving goals. They don't realize they're doing brain training, but their consistent mental habits create stronger motivation pathways that make motivated behavior feel natural and effortless. The technique that builds these stronger neural networks is called motivation rehearsal. This involves repeatedly practicing motivational scenarios in your mind before you encounter them in real life. When you mentally rehearse taking action on your goals, you're literally programming your brain to respond automatically when faced with similar situations. This mental practice creates strong associations between specific situations and motivated responses. Here's how motivation rehearsal works in your brain. When you visualize yourself taking action toward your goals, the same neural pathways activate as when you actually take that action. Your brain can't tell the difference between vividly imagined experiences and real experiences. This means that mental practice creates the same neural strengthening as physical practice, but without requiring any actual action. The research on how mental practice changes actual brain structure is remarkable. Studies show that consistent mental rehearsal of specific actions leads to measurable changes in the brain's neural networks. Brain scans reveal that people who practice motivation scenarios develop thicker neural pathways in regions associated with goal-directed behavior and emotional regulation. These structural changes make motivation feel more automatic and less effortful. Robert was a freelance writer who struggled with procrastination for years. He would sit down to write and immediately feel resistance and avoidance. His brain had developed strong neural pathways that associated writing with struggle and discomfort. Every time he approached his computer, his brain would automatically activate these resistance patterns. Robert learned about motivation rehearsal and started practicing motivation scenarios for just 10 minutes each morning. He would visualize himself sitting down to write and feeling excited and energized. He imagined himself typing words effortlessly and feeling satisfied with his progress. He rehearsed overcoming common obstacles like distractions and mental blocks. This mental practice happened before he ever touched his keyboard. Within 3 weeks, Robert's procrastination patterns had completely changed. His brain had developed new neural pathways that associated writing with excitement and flow rather than resistance and struggle. When he sat down to write, his brain automatically activated the motivation patterns he had rehearsed rather than the old procrastination patterns. The mental practice had literally rewired his brain to prefer motivated action over avoidance. This works because motivation rehearsal programs automatic responses that activate without conscious effort. Through repeated mental practice, your brain learns to automatically respond to certain situations with a state of motivation. This reduces the need for conscious effort to initiate action because your brain has been pre-programmed to generate motivated responses. The exact neural training protocol that builds motivation like a muscle involves 3 specific components. First, you identify the specific situations where you want to feel more motivated. This might be when you need to exercise, work on important projects, or tackle challenging tasks. The key is being specific about the exact circumstances that trigger your motivation challenges. Second, you create detailed mental rehearsal scenarios for each situation. These scenarios should include the physical environment, your emotional state, and the specific actions you want to take. The more vivid and detailed your mental rehearsal, the stronger the neural pathways become. You want to engage all your senses and emotions during the visualization process. Third, you practice these scenarios consistently for short periods each day. 10 minutes of focused mental rehearsal is more effective than occasional longer sessions. Your brain strengthens neural pathways through repetition, so consistent daily practice creates stronger and more permanent changes than sporadic intense sessions. The training protocol works by creating default motivation responses that override your brain's natural resistance patterns. Most people have unconsciously trained their brains to expect difficulty and struggle when approaching challenging tasks. This expectation creates neural patterns that generate resistance and avoidance. But motivation rehearsal creates competing neural patterns that expect success and enjoyment. Advanced practitioners learn to stack multiple motivation scenarios together to create comprehensive neural training programs. They don't just rehearse one type of motivated behavior. They practice multiple scenarios that cover different aspects of their goals and challenges. This comprehensive approach creates a robust network of motivation pathways that support consistent action across various situations. The research demonstrates that people who consistently practice motivation rehearsal develop what scientists call automatic motivation responses. Their brains become programmed to generate motivated states without conscious effort or decision-making. This makes motivation feel effortless because it operates below the level of conscious awareness. This technique makes motivation your brain's preferred state rather than resistance because it literally rewires your neural architecture. When you consistently rehearse motivated responses, those pathways become stronger and more efficient than the old resistance pathways. Your brain starts defaulting to motivation because it's the most well-developed neural option available. The beautiful thing about neural pathway optimization is that it works regardless of your current motivation level. Even when you feel completely unmotivated, you can still practice mental rehearsal scenarios. This practice gradually builds the neural infrastructure needed for automatic motivation, creating a foundation that supports consistent action over time. Your brain will start treating motivation as the natural response to challenging situations, rather than something you need to force or create. The neural pathways you've strengthened through rehearsal will automatically activate when you encounter goal-related situations, making motivated behavior feel as natural as any other learned skill. But understanding these 5 patterns individually is just the beginning. The real transformation happens when you combine them into a unified system that works together. The integration protocol. Each technique creates exponential rather than additive effects when combined strategically. The research shows that combining multiple strategies creates what scientists call a synergistic effect, where the combined impact is greater than the sum of individual strategies. A 2024 study in Frontiers in Psychology found that combining environmental cues with social norms and policy interventions led to a 300% increase in motivation. This integrated approach leverages the strengths of each strategy to reinforce the desired behavior and create lasting habits. The specific order and timing for implementing each strategy matters tremendously for maximum impact. You can't just randomly apply these techniques and expect optimal results. There's a precise sequence that prevents overwhelm while building momentum systematically. The integration sequence starts with strategies that address immediate barriers and provide quick wins before moving to those that focus on long-term transformation. Week 1 focuses on microtargeting and environmental triggers. These strategies provide immediate relief from motivation struggles and create visible progress quickly. You start by breaking your main goal into micro-targets that feel manageable. Simultaneously, you design your environment to support these small actions. This combination creates early wins that build confidence for the more advanced strategies. Week 2 introduces the confidence cascade technique. Now that you're hitting micro-targets consistently, you begin celebrating these small wins to trigger dopamine release. This builds on the momentum from week 1 while training your brain to expect success. Your environment is already supporting your actions, and now you're programming your brain to crave more progress. Week 3 brings identity-based motivation into the system. You start shifting your internal language from "I wanted to" "I am someone who" statements. This works particularly well at this stage because you already have evidence from the previous 2 weeks that supports your new identity. Your brain can accept the identity shift because your actions have already begun to align with it. Week 4 implements elevated perspective programming. You connect your daily micro-targets to deeper purposes and values. This creates emotional fuel that sustains motivation beyond the initial momentum. Your environment supports your actions, your brain expects success, your identity aligns with your goals, and now your deeper purposes provide unlimited energy. Week 5 introduces neural pathway optimization through motivation rehearsal. You practice visualization scenarios that strengthen the neural networks supporting all the previous strategies. This creates automatic responses that make motivated behavior feel effortless. All 5 strategies are now working together to create a self-reinforcing motivation system. Naturally motivated people use all 5 patterns without conscious awareness. They've unconsciously created motivation-rich environments, developed confidence in their ability to make progress, shifted their identity to support their goals, connected their actions to meaningful purposes, and rehearsed success scenarios in their minds. A 2024 study in Frontiers in Psychology found that individuals who successfully maintained exercise routines unconsciously created motivation-rich environments, including visual cues, auditory triggers, and spatial arrangements. The integration sequence prevents overwhelm by introducing one new strategy each week while maintaining the previous ones. This gradual approach allows your brain to adapt to each change without feeling overwhelmed. Research shows that breaking down large goals into smaller, manageable steps creates a sense of accomplishment and builds momentum. Michael was a software engineer who struggled with multiple goals simultaneously. He wanted to exercise regularly, learn new programming languages, and build a side business. Each goal felt overwhelming when he tried to pursue them separately. His motivation would spike for a few days, then crash completely. Michael implemented the integration protocol systematically. In week 1, he broke each goal into 5-minute micro-targets and arranged his environment to support these actions. He placed workout clothes next to his bed, programming books on his desk, and business notebooks in his laptop bag. These environmental cues made it easier to take small actions toward each goal. By week 2, Michael was consistently hitting his micro-targets and began celebrating each small win. When he completed a 5-minute workout, he consciously acknowledged the achievement. When he read one page of a programming book, he felt satisfied with the progress. These celebrations triggered dopamine release that made him crave more progress. Week 3 brought identity shifts that aligned with his actions. Instead of saying, "I want to exercise," he started saying, "I am someone who stays fit." Instead of, "I should learn programming," he said, "I am a developer who constantly improves my skills." These identity statements felt authentic because his actions already supported them. In week 4, Michael connected his micro-targets to deeper purposes. Exercise wasn't just about fitness. It was about having energy for his family and modeling healthy habits for his children. Learning programming wasn't just about career advancement. It was about creating financial security and contributing valuable skills to the world. By week 5, Michael was practicing motivation rehearsal scenarios for challenging situations. He visualized himself exercising when tired, studying when distracted, and working on his business when stressed. These mental rehearsals programmed automatic responses that made motivated behavior feel natural. After 30 days, Michael had transformed completely. He was exercising daily, learning new programming concepts consistently, and making steady progress on his business. More importantly, these behaviors felt effortless. His brain had been rewired to expect success and generate motivation automatically. The 30-day implementation roadmap creates permanent rewiring of motivation patterns through consistent application of integrated strategies. A 2024 study in Frontiers in Psychology found that consistent application of these techniques for 30 days led to a new baseline of motivation, making the desired behaviors feel more natural and less reliant on willpower. This approach fosters a self-reinforcing cycle of increasing motivation capacity. The integration protocol creates a new baseline of motivation that becomes your natural state. Instead of needing to generate motivation, you naturally have it because all 5 strategies work together to support motivated behavior. Your environment triggers action, your brain expects success, your identity aligns with your goals, your purposes provide energy, and your neural pathways automatically generate motivated responses. This transforms you into someone who naturally thinks like the most motivated people. A 2024 study in Frontiers in Psychology found that individuals who adopted this approach experienced a self-reinforcing cycle of increasing motivation capacity, making the desired behaviors feel effortless and sustainable. You stop trying to be motivated and simply become motivated because that's how your brain now operates by default. When you understand how these 5 patterns work together, you realize something profound about the nature of motivation itself. Motivation becomes a skill you develop rather than a trait you either have or lack. These 5 patterns aren't temporary fixes or motivational tricks. They're systematic approaches that rewire your brain's fundamental relationship with goals and challenges. The transformation happens when you stop trying to force motivation and start creating the conditions where it emerges naturally. Your brain begins operating like naturally motivated people because you're using the same psychological frameworks they've developed unconsciously. Start with micro-targeting this week. Break your most important goal into 5-minute actions and celebrate each completion. Your brain will begin forming new neural pathways that support motivated behavior automatically. These patterns compound over time, creating the effortless motivation that seemed impossible before you understood how it actually works.